The Veterans Day Parade in Crescent Bay, Oregon, was a small-town affair, the kind where everyone knew everyone. Local veterans marched down Main Street in their dress uniforms, some crisp and new, others decades old and carefully preserved. American flags lined the sidewalks, and families cheered as the high school band played patriotic songs slightly off-key. Grace Donovan stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, a simple jacket, boots. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her hazel eyes tracked the parade with the focused awareness of someone trained to notice everything. She'd lived in Crescent Bay for 11 months now, ever since her medical retirement. She'd chosen this town specifically because it was small, quiet, and 3,000 miles from her old life. Nobody here knew who she was. That was exactly how she wanted it. "You should be marching with them." Grace turned. Old Joe Henderson stood beside her, leaning on his cane. He was 83, a Korean War veteran who ran the local hardware store. Grace had helped him carry inventory last month when his back went out. "I'm fine here, Joe," Grace said quietly. "You're a veteran too, aren't you? I can tell the way you stand, the way you watch, you've got the look." Grace smiled but said nothing. Joe was perceptive, but she'd been careful never to confirm or deny. She'd helped him because he needed help, not because she wanted questions. "Suit yourself," Joe said, tipping his cap, "but you earned the right to march same as anyone." He shuffled off, leaving Grace alone with her thoughts. The parade continued. More veterans passed, some walking with pride, others in wheelchairs pushed by family members. The crowd clapped and cheered. Grace felt the familiar tightness in her chest, pride mixed with loss, honor mixed with grief for the brothers and sisters who never came home. Then someone grabbed her arm. Grace spun, her body automatically shifting into a defensive stance before she caught herself. A woman stood there, middle-aged, with hard eyes and a suspicious expression. Her name was Rita Marsh, and Grace knew her from the grocery store. Rita was loud, opinionated, and ran the local veterans support group with an iron fist. "I need to talk to you," Rita said. "About what?" "About you, about the lies you've been telling." Grace's pulse remained steady, but her senses sharpened. "I don't know what you mean." Rita pulled out her phone, turning it so Grace could see the screen. It was a photograph, posted on the Crescent Bay Community Facebook page. The photo showed Grace from 2 weeks ago walking out of the post office. She'd been wearing her old navy jacket that day, the one she usually kept in her closet. It had been cold and raining, and she'd grabbed it without thinking. The jacket clearly showed her rank insignia and unit patches. "This is you," Rita said, wearing a Navy uniform jacket with officer's insignia, with special warfare patches, with ribbons that include the Navy Cross. Grace said nothing. "Do you know what stolen valor is?" Rita continued, her voice rising. People were starting to turn to notice the confrontation. "It's when people pretend to be military heroes, when they wear uniforms and medals they didn't earn. It's disgusting. It's illegal, and I've been tracking you." "Rita, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You moved here less than a year ago. Nobody knows anything about you. You keep to yourself. You never talk about your service. And then you wear a jacket with decorations that are extremely rare. The Navy Cross is the second highest award for valor. Women weren't even allowed in special warfare until recently. Do you expect me to believe you're some kind of hero?" Grace felt the familiar walls closing in. She'd known this moment would come eventually. She couldn't hide forever, not in a small town where everyone noticed everything. "That jacket is mine," Grace said quietly. "I earned everything on it." "Prove it." "I don't have to prove anything to you." Rita's face flushed red. "That's what they all say, the fakers, the liars. They wear stolen glory and then refuse to provide documentation when confronted." She raised her voice louder. "Everyone, this woman is committing stolen valor. She's wearing military decorations she didn't earn." The parade had stopped. People turned to stare. Veterans in uniform looked over, their expressions hardening. Someone pulled out a phone to record. Grace stood very still. She'd survived firefights, survived interrogation training, survived injuries that should have killed her. She could survive this. But the injustice of it, the accusation, the public humiliation burned like acid. "Rita, please," Grace said. "Not here, not now." "Yes, here, yes, now. The community deserves to know there's a fraud living among them." A man pushed through the crowd. His name was Dennis Cole, president of the local VFW post. He was 65, Vietnam veteran with a chest full of his own medals and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. "What's going on?" he demanded. Rita pointed at Grace. "This woman has been wearing a Navy uniform with special warfare insignia and a Navy Cross ribbon. I'm calling her out for stolen valor." Dennis looked at Grace with cold eyes. "That true? You've been wearing military decorations." "I own a Navy jacket," Grace said. "Everything on it is legitimate." "You got proof?" "At home." "Convenient," Rita sneered. "They always say that." Dennis crossed his arms. "Ma'am, stolen valor is a serious accusation, but it's also serious to falsely accuse a veteran. Which one are you?" "I'm a veteran." "What's your rate, your unit, your dates of service?" Grace hesitated. Much of her service was classified. She couldn't discuss her unit, her missions, or the specific circumstances of her decorations. The Navy Cross citation existed, but the details were redacted. Even her military records were partially sealed. "I can't discuss the specifics," Grace said. "Some of my service is classified." Rita laughed harshly. "Of course it is. That's the perfect excuse, isn't it? It's classified, so I can't prove it." That's what all the fakers say. More people had gathered now. Grace recognized faces from around town. The librarian, the coffee shop owner, families she'd seen at the park, all of them looking at her with suspicion, disappointment, anger. "I think we should call the police," Dennis said. "Let them sort this out." "I agree," Rita said. "Stolen valor is a federal crime. She should be arrested." Grace felt the trap closing. If the police came, they'd run her name. They'd find her military records, or at least the unclassified parts. But they'd also generate attention, questions, possibly media coverage. Her anonymity would be destroyed. The whole reason she'd come to Crescent Bay, to heal in peace, to escape the spotlight, would be gone. But what choice did she have? "Fine," Grace said. "Call the police." Rita was already dialing. Dennis stood guard as if Grace might run. The crowd pressed closer, phones out, recording every moment. Grace stood at the center of it all, alone and exposed, wondering how her quiet life had unraveled so quickly. The parade had completely stopped now. Veterans who'd been marching came over to see what the commotion was about. One of them, a young Marine in his dress blues, shook his head in disgust when he saw Grace. "Stolen valor," someone muttered. "Shameful." Grace closed her eyes briefly. She'd survived worse than public humiliation. She'd survived this too. But the weight of it, of being called a liar and a fraud when she'd given everything to her country, was almost unbearable. A police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Officer Mike Torres stepped out. Grace knew him slightly. He came into the diner where she sometimes had breakfast. He was young, professional, ex-Army. "What's the situation?" he asked. Rita launched into her explanation, showing the photo, pointing at Grace, her voice shrill with righteous indignation. Dennis added his own concerns. The crowd murmured in agreement. Officer Torres turned to Grace. "Ma'am, do you have military identification?" "At home." "Do you have any identification on you?" Grace pulled out her driver's license. Torres examined it, then looked at her carefully. "Ms. Donovan, these are serious allegations. I'm going to need you to come to the station so we can verify your military service." "Am I being arrested?" "Not at this time, but I am asking you to come voluntarily to clear this up." Grace nodded. "I'll cooperate." "Wait." The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep, authoritative, cutting through the noise like a blade. People turned, parting to let someone through. An older man pushed forward. He was in his 70s, tall and straight-backed despite his age. He wore a simple suit, no uniform, but something about the way he carried himself commanded immediate respect. His hair was white, his face weathered, but his blue eyes were sharp and clear. Grace's breath caught. She knew that face. She'd seen it in briefing rooms, in classified meetings, in moments of crisis when decisions meant life or death. Rear Admiral James Keller, retired, former commander of Naval Special Warfare. He'd been her ultimate superior during her last deployment. He knew everything. Keller walked straight to Grace, his eyes scanning her face. Then his gaze dropped to her neck, to a place just below her left ear where her collar usually covered. Grace had turned her head slightly when Rita first grabbed her. The movement had exposed a scar that was normally hidden, a distinctive mark, jagged and deep, running from below her ear down toward her collarbone. Keller's eyes widened. His face went pale, his mouth opened, then closed. "My God," he whispered, "it's her." The crowd went silent. Officer Torres looked between the Admiral and Grace, confused. Rita frowned, sensing her moment of triumph slipping away. "Admiral," Torres said. He recognized the bearing of a senior officer even without the uniform. Keller didn't take his eyes off Grace. "Officer, lower your hand from those handcuffs. This woman is not a criminal." "Sir, with all respect, I don't know who you are." "Rear Admiral James Keller, United States Navy, retired. I was the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command from 2015 to 2019. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a wallet, flipping it open to show a retired military ID. "And I'm telling you that this woman is a legitimate veteran who earned every decoration she's ever worn." Rita stepped forward. "That's impossible. Women can't earn special warfare." "Women have been in naval special warfare since 2016, Keller said sharply, "and this particular woman is one of the most decorated operators in the history of the command." He looked at Grace, and his expression softened. "Lieutenant Commander, it's been a long time." Grace's throat was tight. "Admiral, you disappeared after your medical retirement. We looked for you. Wanted to make sure you were okay. You didn't want to be found." "No, sir, I didn't." Keller nodded slowly. "I understand. After everything you went through, you earned your privacy." He turned to face the crowd. "But these people deserve to know who they're accusing." "Admiral, please," Grace said quietly. "I came here to get away from all that." "I know, and I'll respect your wishes about the details, but I can't let these people call you a fraud." He addressed the crowd, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This woman is Grace Donovan, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy, retired. She served for 14 years with multiple combat deployments. She earned the Navy Cross, the Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars with Valor, and the Purple Heart with 3 clusters." The crowd murmured. Dennis Cole's expression had changed from suspicion to shock. Rita wasn't ready to back down. "How do we know you're telling the truth? How do we know you're really an admiral? This could be some kind of scam." "Because I can verify it right now," Keller said. He pulled out his phone. "Officer Torres, call the Navy Personnel Command Verification Line. I'll give you the number. Ask them about Lieutenant Commander Grace Donovan. They'll confirm her service record, at least the unclassified parts." Torres looked uncertain, but he nodded. "I'll make the call." While Torres stepped away to his cruiser, Keller moved closer to Grace. He spoke in a low voice only she could hear. "How bad is it? The injuries, the dreams?" "I'm managing," Grace said. "That's not an answer." Grace met his eyes. "It's the only answer I have, sir." Keller's expression was pained. "You saved 18 lives that night. You held that position for 7 hours with 3 bullet wounds and a shrapnel injury to your neck. You refused evacuation until every single hostage was safe. You're a hero, Grace." "I did my job." "You did far more than your job. You did the impossible." He glanced at her neck where the scar was visible. "That mark. I saw the photographs in the medical reports. I saw the after-action videos. That scar is from when the insurgent tried to cut your throat while you were providing cover fire." Grace's hand automatically went to her neck, covering the scar. "I'd rather not discuss it." "I understand. But Grace, these people need to know they made a terrible mistake. Not the classified details, just enough to understand who you are." Officer Torres returned from his cruiser, his face pale. "Ma'am, I just spoke with Navy Personnel Command. They confirmed your service, your rank, and your decorations. They also said much of your file is classified and I don't have clearance to know more." He looked genuinely shaken. "Lieutenant Commander Donovan, I apologize. I was just responding to a complaint, but I should have." "You did your job, officer," Grace said. "No apology necessary." Rita's face had gone from red to white. But the photo, you looked so young and women can't." "Women can," Keller said firmly. "And do. Lieutenant Commander Donovan was one of the first women to complete the Naval Special Warfare Training Pipeline. She graduated top of her class. She then served with distinction in some of the most dangerous operations in recent history." Dennis Cole removed his cap and held it against his chest. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I'm ashamed that I doubted you." Grace nodded but said nothing. The anger and hurt were still there, simmering beneath her calm exterior. Old Joe Henderson pushed through the crowd, his cane tapping against the pavement. I told you she was one of us, I could see it. He looked at Rita with disgust. You should be ashamed, Rita Marsh, accusing a real hero while you've never served a day in your life. Rita's mouth opened and closed. I was trying to protect real veterans from frauds. I've seen so many cases online where people fake their service. And now you've seen a case where you attacked a real veteran, Joe said, where you humiliated a woman who's done more for this country than you'll ever understand. The crowd was shifting now. People who'd been filming Grace's supposed disgrace were lowering their phones. The veterans who'd gathered were standing at attention, some saluting despite being in civilian clothes. The young Marine who'd muttered about stolen valor stepped forward. Ma'am, I spoke out of turn. I'm sorry if I'd known. You couldn't have known, Grace said quietly. I keep to myself, that was my choice. Keller addressed the crowd again. Lieutenant Commander Donovan came to Crescent Bay to find peace after her medical retirement. She wasn't hiding from her service. She was recovering from it. She's earned the right to privacy, to quiet, to a life without constant questions and attention. I'm going to ask all of you to respect that. But she's a hero, someone called out. She should be honored. She should be left alone, Keller said firmly. That's the honor she wants, that's what she's earned. Grace felt tears threatening but pushed them down. Not here, not now. She'd maintained her composure through torture, through combat, through physical therapy that felt like torture. She could maintain it through this. But it was hard. Rita stepped forward, her hands shaking. Lieutenant Commander, I made a terrible mistake. I was wrong, I'm so sorry. Grace looked at her. She wanted to be angry. Part of her was angry, but another part understood. Rita had been trying to protect veterans in her own misguided way. Apology accepted, Grace said. But Mrs. Marsh, in the future, before you accuse someone of stolen valor, consider asking them their story first. Consider that not everyone who serves wants to talk about it. Consider that silence doesn't mean fraud. Rita nodded, tears running down her face. I will, I promise. Officer Torres cleared his throat. Ma'am, you're free to go, of course. Again, I apologize for the inconvenience. Grace nodded. She wanted to leave, to get away from all these eyes, all this attention. But Keller placed a gentle hand on her arm. Grace, walk with me for a moment. She wanted to refuse, but he was asking, not ordering, and she respected him too much to say no. They walked away from the crowd, down a side street where the noise of the parade was muffled. Keller moved slowly, matching her pace. How did you find me? Grace asked. I'm not here looking for you. I retired to Portland 3 years ago. My daughter lives here in Crescent Bay. I come to visit her for the holidays. He smiled sadly. Apparently the universe has a sense of timing. Or irony. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Keller spoke again. You know the operation you led in Afghanistan, the hostage rescue? It's still classified, but it's also legendary. People in the special warfare community talk about it in whispers. The ghost of Kabul, they call you. The operator who held off an entire insurgent cell single-handedly while wounded, who refused to abandon the mission even when ordered to evacuate. I wasn't alone, I had a team. A team that had been forced to withdraw because of overwhelming enemy fire. You stayed behind with the hostages because someone had to. You held that position for 7 hours, Grace. 7 hours with 3 bullet wounds and your throat cut. Grace touched her neck again. The scar was a constant reminder. The cut wasn't that deep, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. Deep enough that you should have bled out. Deep enough that the combat medics called your survival a miracle. Keller stopped walking, turning to face her. Grace, why did you disappear? Why did you refuse the ceremonies, the interviews, the recognition? Grace leaned against a brick wall, suddenly tired. The adrenaline from the confrontation was fatting, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Because I'm not a ghost, Admiral. I'm not a legend. I'm just a broken soldier trying to figure out how to live a normal life. Broken, Keller's eyes narrowed. Is that how you see yourself? That's what I am. The injuries, the PTSD, the chronic pain, I can't serve anymore. I can't do the job I trained my whole adult life to do, so I'm broken. You're wounded, there's a difference. Grace laughed, but it was bitter. Tell that to my doctors. Tell that to the medical board that retired me against my will. Tell that to the nights when I wake up thinking I'm back in that compound, hearing the hostages crying, hearing the enemy moving closer. Keller was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. After I retired, I went through a dark period. I defined myself by my service for 40 years. Without it, I didn't know who I was. I drank too much, pushed my family away, convinced myself I was useless because I wasn't commanding operations anymore. What changed? My grandson, he was 5 at the time, he asked me to teach him to ride a bike, and I realized that I could still serve, just in a different way. I could still contribute, I could still matter. He met Grace's eyes. You matter, Grace, not because of what you did in Afghanistan, because of who you are, the woman who helps old Joe carry inventory, the woman who volunteers at the library, the woman who chooses to live quietly and help people without needing recognition. I'm not helping anyone, I'm hiding. You're healing, there's no shame in that. Grace pushed off from the wall. Admiral, why are you telling me this? Because I saw your face back there. When that crowd turned on you, you looked like you were ready to give up, to disappear even further, and I don't want you to do that. What do you want me to do? Keller pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. There's a veterans support group that meets in Portland. Trauma recovery, PTSD management, transition counseling. It's run by a former Navy psychologist who specializes in special operations personnel. She's helped a lot of people. Helped me. Grace took the card but didn't look at it. I don't need. Everyone needs help, Grace, especially after what you've been through. His voice was firm but kind. You held that position for 7 hours. You saved 18 lives. You survived injuries that should have killed you. But you can't survive alone forever. Eventually, you need reinforcements. Grace slipped the card into her pocket. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Keller checked his watch. I should get back to my daughter's house, but Grace, one more thing. Sir? This town is going to want to make amends. They're going to want to honor you, celebrate you, probably give you a parade of your own. You can't stop that completely, but you can control it. Set boundaries, accept what you're comfortable with, and politely decline the rest. And if I want to decline all of it? That's your right, but consider that letting them make amends might help them as much as it helps you. They made a mistake. Good people want to fix their mistakes. Grace thought about Rita's tear-stained face, about Dennis Cole's genuine remorse, about Officer Tor's obvious regret. They had made a mistake, but they'd also listened when the truth came out. They'd accepted it. That counted for something. I'll consider it, Grace said. Keller smiled. You're still one of the best operators I ever commanded, Grace. Tactical thinking, strategic awareness, ability to assess and adapt. Those skills don't disappear just because you're retired. After Keller left, Grace walked slowly back toward Main Street. The parade had resumed, but a small group still stood where the confrontation had happened. When they saw her, they came over. Dennis Cole led them. Ma'am, we'd like to apologize properly. As president of the VFW, I'm mortified by how you were treated. We should have shown you respect as a fellow veteran from the beginning. It's done, Grace said. No, it's not done. We want to make it right. He gestured to the others. We'd like to invite you to speak at our Veterans Day ceremony this evening. Share your story if you're willing. Help us understand what service means. Grace shook her head. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not comfortable with public speaking about my service. We understand, but maybe you'd at least come to the ceremony, stand with us. Let people see that you're part of this community. Grace wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her to go home, lock her door, and return to her quiet anonymity. But Keller's words echoed in her mind. Good people want to fix their mistakes. I'll come, she said, but no speeches, no spotlight, I'll just attend. Dennis looked relieved. That's more than fair, thank you, ma'am. As they dispersed, old Joe stayed behind. You handled that with more grace than I would have, he said. No pun intended. Grace managed a small smile. I've had practice controlling my temper. I bet you have, Joe leaned on his cane. You know my son lives in San Diego, he's Navy. Never talks much about his work, says it's classified, but he comes home sometimes with that same look you have, like he's seen things he can't unsee, done things he can't talk about. It's a common look. Yeah, which is why I recognized it in you. Joe's eyes were kind. This town, we're small, we're nosy, we make mistakes, but we're also loyal. Once you're one of us, we take care of our own. And Grace, whether you like it or not, you're one of us now. Grace felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. Thank you, Joe. No thanks necessary. Just keep helping me with inventory. My back ain't getting any younger. That evening, Grace stood at the back of the VFW hall during the Veterans Day ceremony. She changed into simple slacks and a blouse, nothing military. But when she entered, the entire room had stood. Veterans in their uniforms, families, community members, they'd stood in respect. Grace had frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed. Dennis Cole had gestured to a seat of honor at the front. She'd shaken her head, choosing instead to stand in the back. He'd accepted it without argument. The ceremony was simple and moving. Stories were shared. A moment of silence observed. Names of fallen veterans read aloud. Grace stood quietly, her hand over her heart during the national anthem, her eyes dry even as others wept. When it ended, people approached her, not for selfies or autographs, just to shake her hand, to say thank you, to welcome her. One woman, elderly and frail, took both of Grace's hands in hers. "My grandson is in the Navy, special warfare. I worry about him every day, but knowing there are people like you watching out for people like him, it helps. Thank you." Grace's voice was rough. "I hope he stays safe, ma'am." Rita Marsh approached last. She looked like she'd been crying. "Lieutenant Commander, I posted an apology on the community Facebook page. I explained what happened and took full responsibility for my mistake. I also resigned as head of the Veterans Support Group. I don't deserve that position after what I did." "Mrs. Marsh, please let me finish. I've been so focused on catching fakes that I became exactly what I claimed to hate. Someone who disrespects real veterans. I'm ashamed. I hope someday you can forgive me." Grace studied her. Rita's remorse was genuine. "I forgive you, Mrs. Marsh, and for what it's worth, you shouldn't resign. The Veterans Group needs dedicated people. Just maybe approach things with more compassion and less accusation." Rita nodded, tears streaming. "I will, I promise." As Grace left the VFW hall, she found Admiral Keller waiting outside. "I heard you came. I'm proud of you." "Don't be, I just stood in the back." "You showed up. After what happened this morning, that took courage." He walked with her toward her truck. "Grace, I meant what I said about the support group. Will you at least try one meeting?" Grace pulled out the card he'd given her. In the streetlight, she read the information. The group met twice a month in Portland. The next meeting was in 3 days. "I'll think about it," she said. "Still giving me that answer?" "Still the only answer I have, sir." Keller smiled. "Fair enough. But Grace, you've spent your whole career being brave in combat. Maybe it's time to be brave in recovery, too." 3 days later, Grace found herself driving to Portland. She changed her mind 17 times, turning around twice before finally forcing herself to continue. The address led her to a community center in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, she found a small room with a circle of chairs and a coffee station. 8 people were already there. 7 veterans of various ages and 1 woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Dr. Sharon Webb, the facilitator. "You must be Grace," Dr. Webb said warmly. "Admiral Keller called to say you might come. Welcome." Grace took a seat, her body tense. The other veterans nodded in greeting. They ranged from a young woman who looked barely 25 to a man in his 60s with a service dog at his feet. "We keep things simple here," Dr. Webb explained. "No pressure to share, no judgment. We're just veterans helping veterans work through the challenges of post-service life. PTSD, physical injuries, transition struggles, whatever you're dealing with." The meeting started. One by one, people shared. The young woman talked about nightmares from her deployment to Iraq. A middle-aged man discussed his struggles with chronic pain and opioid addiction. The older veteran with the service dog talked about his journey from homelessness to stability. Grace listened, saying nothing, but she recognized herself in their stories: the hypervigilance, the difficulty sleeping, the sense of being disconnected from civilian life. When it came to her turn, she shook her head. "I'm not ready to share yet." "That's perfectly fine," Dr. Webb said. "Just being here is a big step." After the meeting, several veterans approached Grace. The young woman from Iraq extended her hand. "I'm Melissa. If you ever want to grab coffee and just not talk about feelings, I'm around." Grace shook her hand. "I might take you up on that." The older veteran with the service dog introduced himself as Frank. "Navy?" he asked, nodding something in the way Grace carried herself. "Yes, you." "Marines, Vietnam," he smiled. "We all got our stories. Take your time with yours. It'll come when you're ready." Grace left the meeting feeling lighter somehow. Not healed, not fixed, but less alone. She drove back to Crescent Bay as the sun set over the Pacific. The ocean stretched endlessly to her left, waves catching the golden light. She thought about the last year, about her choice to hide, to disappear, to avoid anything that reminded her of her service. Maybe it was time to make different choices. Over the next few weeks, Grace slowly began to let people in. She accepted Joe Henderson's invitation to join a weekly poker game with other local veterans. She started volunteering at the library's reading program, working with children. She even agreed to have coffee with Rita Marsh, who was genuinely trying to make amends. But she also set boundaries. When the local newspaper wanted to interview her, she politely declined. When the mayor asked her to be Grand Marshal of next year's parade, she said no. She was willing to be part of the community, but on her own terms. The second support group meeting was easier than the first. Grace still didn't share her story, but she participated in discussions about coping strategies and transition challenges. Melissa became a friend, someone Grace could text when the nightmares got bad, someone who understood without needing explanations. Admiral Keller checked in periodically, always careful not to push too hard. They'd meet for coffee when he was visiting his daughter. They'd talk about the Navy, about Portland, about everything except the night in Afghanistan. Grace appreciated that he knew when to leave the past alone. 1 month after the Veterans Day incident, Grace was working in her small garden behind her cottage when her phone rang. The number was from Washington, D.C. She almost didn't answer. "This is Grace." "Lieutenant Commander Donovan? This is Captain Stevens from the Navy Personnel Command. I'm calling to inform you that you've been selected to receive the Defense Distinguished Service Medal for your actions in Afghanistan. The ceremony will be at the Pentagon in 3 weeks. Grace's hand tightened on the phone. "Captain, I appreciate the honor, but I'm not interested in ceremonies or public recognition." "Ma'am, this isn't optional. The medal has been approved at the highest levels. Secretary of Defense wants to personally present it. The ceremony is already scheduled." "Then respectfully, I decline to attend." There was a pause. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is a direct order from the Secretary. Your presence is required." Grace closed her eyes. She'd known this was coming eventually. Her actions in Afghanistan had been too significant to ignore forever, but she'd hoped for more time. "I'll need to think about it, Captain." "Ma'am, I need confirmation of your attendance." "Give me 48 hours. She hung up before he could argue. Then she called Admiral Keller. "They're ordering me to D.C. for a medal ceremony," she said without preamble. "I heard it might be coming. The Defense Distinguished Service Medal. Grace, that's one of the highest honors in the entire military." "I don't want it." "I know, but you've earned it. And sometimes we have to accept recognition not for ourselves, but for everyone who served with us. For the mission, for the sacrifice." Grace sat down heavily on her garden bench. "If I go, there will be media, questions, my face all over the news. My anonymity will be completely destroyed." "Probably," Keller admitted. "But Grace, you can't hide forever, and maybe it's time to let the world know your story, not all of it, just enough to understand why you deserve that medal, why women in combat deserve respect, why service matters." "I came to Crescent Bay to escape all that." "And you've had a year to heal in peace. But healing doesn't mean hiding. It means becoming strong enough to face the world again, even when it's hard." Grace thought about the support group, about Melissa's courage in talking about her nightmares, about Frank's journey from homelessness to stability, about her own slow progress from isolation to community. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I'm doing it on my terms. I'll accept the medal. I'll attend the ceremony, but I won't do interviews. I won't talk about the classified details. And afterward I come back here to my quiet life." "That's fair. I'll call Captain Stevens and confirm those boundaries." "You'll come with me to D.C. "Grace, I'd be honored." 3 weeks later, Grace stood in the Pentagon's ceremonial hall wearing her dress uniform for the first time in over a year. The fabric felt strange, the ribbons heavy on her chest. Her hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, her shoes polished to a mirror shine. Admiral Keller stood beside her in his own dress uniform, brought out of retirement for the occasion. Melissa had come too, along with Dr. Webb and, surprisingly, old Joe Henderson, who'd insisted on being there. "You look like a warrior," Melissa whispered as they waited. "I feel like a fraud," Grace whispered back. You're not, you're the real deal. We all are. The ceremony was formal and brief. The Secretary of Defense read the citation, his voice echoing through the hall. He described the hostage situation in Afghanistan, the overwhelming enemy force, Grace's decision to stay behind and provide cover while her team evacuated with half the hostages. He described the 7-hour firefight, Grace's 3 gunshot wounds, the insurgent who'd tried to cut her throat, her refusal to abandon the remaining hostages, her successful defense until reinforcements arrived. He described 18 lives saved, including 4 American contractors and 14 Afghan civilians. When he pinned the medal to her uniform, Grace stood at rigid attention, her eyes focused on the flag behind him. She didn't let herself feel. Not yet. Feeling would come later in private. Lieutenant Commander Grace Donovan, the secretary said, your actions represent the highest traditions of military service. You embodied courage, dedication, and selfless sacrifice. The nation is grateful. The hostages you saved are grateful, and every service member who looks to you as an example is grateful. Thank you. Grace saluted. Thank you, sir, but I didn't act alone. My team, my commanders, the support personnel who got us there and brought us home. The medal belongs to all of them. Spoken like a true leader, the secretary said. After the ceremony, there was a small reception. Several of the hostages Grace had saved attended. One was a contractor named David Sullivan, who'd been in that compound with his teenage daughter. He approached Grace with tears in his eyes. Lieutenant Commander, I don't know if you remember me. I remember everyone from that night, Mr. Sullivan. My daughter, Emily, she's in college now, studying international relations. She wants to join the Foreign Service. None of that would be possible if you hadn't. His voice broke. You saved her life. You saved my life. How do I thank you for that? Grace felt her own composure cracking. You just did, sir. Knowing she's safe and building a life, that's all the thanks I need. Emily Sullivan, now 20, stepped forward. I don't remember much from that night. I was so scared, but I remember your voice. You kept talking to us, keeping us calm, telling us we'd be okay. I believed you, and you were right. Grace shook the young woman's hand. You were very brave. I learned from the best, Emily said. Other hostages shared similar stories. A diplomat who'd returned to Afghanistan to continue peace work. An Afghan translator who'd been resettled in America with his family. A journalist who'd written a book about resilience and survival. Each one of them alive because Grace had held that position for 7 hours, because she'd refused to leave them behind. As the reception ended and people began to leave, Admiral Keller pulled Grace aside. How are you holding up? I'm okay, actually better than okay. Grace touched the medal on her chest. Seeing them, hearing what they've done with their lives, it helps. It makes that night mean something beyond just survival. It always meant something, Grace. You just needed time to see it. Grace looked around the hall, at the flags and the photos of heroes past, at the symbols of service and sacrifice. I think I'm ready to go home now. To Crescent Bay. Yes, that's home now. They flew back to Oregon the next day. Grace had declined all media requests, all interview opportunities, all book deals. She'd accepted her medal, honored the people she'd saved, and now she was returning to her quiet life. But when she arrived in Crescent Bay, she found the town had prepared a small surprise. Not a parade, not a ceremony, just a simple welcome home. Main Street had one banner, Welcome Home, Grace. The VFW hall had a coffee and cookies reception. No speeches, no formality, just neighbors welcoming one of their own. Old Joe was there, grinning. Couldn't let you come back to an empty town. Rita Marsh handed her a coffee. We wanted you to know you're appreciated, but we also respect your privacy. This is it, no more fuss. Dennis Cole added, You're one of us now, Grace, a Crescent Bay veteran, and we take care of our own. Grace looked at the faces around her. People who'd judged her, then learned better. People who'd made mistakes and made amends. People who'd given her space to heal and community to belong to. Thank you, she said simply. This means more than you know. That night, Grace sat on her porch watching the ocean. The medal was in a box inside, already tucked away. She didn't need to display it. She knew what it represented. She thought about the journey from that night in Afghanistan to this quiet moment in Crescent Bay. The pain, the fear, the isolation, the slow healing, the reluctant emergence from hiding, the gradual acceptance that she could be both a warrior and a person at peace. Her phone buzzed. A text from Melissa, "Proud of you, see you at group next week." Grace smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." Another text, this one from Admiral Keller, "You've earned your peace, Grace, enjoy it." She looked at the card Dr. Webb had given her after the ceremony. It had a quote, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear." Grace had been courageous in combat. She'd faced down enemy fighters, held positions against impossible odds, refused to abandon those who needed her. But maybe the greater courage was this: accepting help, building community, allowing herself to be known and cared for despite the vulnerability it required. The ocean whispered against the shore, endless and patient. Stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had shone over Afghanistan, over every battlefield, over every place she'd served. Grace Donovan, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy, retired, war hero, and resident of Crescent Bay, Oregon, closed her eyes and let the peace wash over her. She'd earned it. Every scarred, painful, hard-won moment of it. And finally, she was ready to accept it.